On July 19th, the EU Central Digital Product Passport Registry activates. The textile sector is not in the first wave, but the EU itself says preparation takes 18 to 36 months, which means the clock is already running. Stay with me on this. Here is what is documented in the European Commission's own materials. July 19th, 2026. The central DPP registry goes live. EU customs systems begin automated verification for products in the first wave: batteries, energy-intensive industrial products, textiles. The delegated act with specific requirements is expected in second quarter 2027. Compliance applies approximately 18 months later, late 2028 or early 2029. Phase 1 for textiles covers fiber composition, hazardous substances, mandatory labeling. Phase 2 adds environmental impact and supply chain mapping by 2030. Phase 3 is the full circular DPP by 2033, and the EU's own preparation estimate from their own studies, 18 to 36 months, depending on supply chain complexity and IT maturity. And here is the part of the timeline that the headlines are not connecting. Listen. Most coverage of DPP frames it one of two ways. Either infrastructure activates July 19th, get ready, or textiles don't apply until 2028, plenty of time. Both framings are technically accurate. Both miss the math. If textile compliance lands in late 2028 and EU's own studies estimate 18 to 36 months of preparation work, the latest realistic start date is sometime between today and late 2027, which means the deadline doesn't feel urgent yet, but the preparation window is opening now. And the companies that wait until the rules are final in 2027 will be starting 18 months of work with 12 months of runway. The math doesn't care how it feels. And the reason this matters operationally is in how the data flow actually has to work. Here is what the regulation says about who is responsible for what. Under DPP rules, whoever places the product on the EU market, usually the brand or the importer, carries legal responsibility for data accuracy. But the data they have to declare is not data they own: composition by percentage, material origin, chemical compliance documentation, processing details, supply chain mapping from raw material to finished garment, transportation distances and modes. Most of that information sits upstream. The fiber producer has the fiber data. The fabric mill has the composition and processing data. The dyeing supplier has the chemical data. The brand sits at the bottom of this chain, legally responsible, but operationally dependent on every layer above. The European Commission's own guidance is explicit. You cannot create a DPP alone. It requires radical collaboration with your entire supply network. One more layer. Because the regulation applies to any product placed on the EU market, regardless of where it was made, mills outside the EU are indirectly bound by it. A fabric mill in Bursa, Turkey, producing for a German brand, has to provide DPP data even though Turkey itself is not subject to the regulation. Two regulatory environments, one data flow. Quick one before we go deeper. Two questions for you. Tell me below. 1. If you work on the brand side, do you actually know which of your fabric suppliers can already provide fiber composition by percentage, supplier origin, and chemical certification in a structured digital format? Or are you assuming they can? 2. If you work on the mill or supplier side, has any brand customer of yours started asking for this data in a structured format yet? Or is everyone still requesting PDF certificates that nobody is going to be able to upload to a passport? And if nothing comes to mind to write, just drop a ring emoji in the comments. Those who know me know why. For everyone else, it's a small gesture that helps me and the channel. Hit the like if this is landing. Now let me tell you why the math worries me, based on what I've seen the industry do before. I have been in this trade for over 20 years, long enough to remember REACH, the European chemical regulation that came into force in 2007. The conversation about REACH started years before that. Most of the textile industry treated it as far away until it wasn't. By the time many companies started taking it seriously, the runway for compliance had already shrunk to months instead of years. Same pattern with OEKO-TEX certifications. Voluntary for a long time, then quietly required by major brand buyers. Mills that prepared early kept their accounts. Mills that prepared late lost them. And what I am seeing now feels familiar. Based on my own conversations with mills and what I read in industry coverage, the DPP is being treated as the next faraway regulation. The Chapter 11 of Lycra, the luxury Q1 numbers, the wool spike, all of those are getting more attention this month than the regulatory infrastructure that activates in 80 days. I am not saying I have insider data on what every brand and mill is or isn't doing. I am saying the pattern of "we have time" before a regulatory deadline has, historically, been the most expensive mistake the textile industry has repeated. And if you are a brand, an importer, a sourcing manager, or a fabric mill working with EU buyers, here are 3 concrete decisions to make in the next 90 days. 1. Map your supply chain visibility. Not your supply chain, your visibility into it. Pick a flagship product. Trace it backward. Do you know today the fiber source, the spinning mill, the dyeing facility, the finishing supplier? If you can't answer those 4 questions for one product, you can't answer them for 100. Start with 1. 2. Open the data conversation with your fabric suppliers, in writing, on a structured format this quarter. Don't ask, "Are you ready?" Ask, "Can you give me composition percentages, origin certificates, and chemical compliance documentation for this fabric in a digital format I can pass through to a passport system?" Their answer tells you everything. 3. Decide internally who owns DPP compliance. Sustainability team? Sourcing team? IT compliance? A new function? Pick a name. Give them budget. Give them deadline. The companies I have seen handle previous regulations well had a single owner. The ones that handled them badly had a committee. If you are doing one of these 3 things already, tell me which one and where you are getting stuck. The answers I read here go directly into the questions I bring to my next mill and brand meetings. Let's keep building this map together. And one more thing before I let you go. If the DPP requires traceability that most of the supply chain doesn't have today, the obvious next question is, does anybody in the textile world already have it? There is one place that has been doing traceability for 150 years before anyone called it sustainability. Prato, the Italian textile district where I am based. 45,000 square meters of new recycling infrastructure are about to open. 47 million euros invested. Capacity to process 20,000 tons of textile waste per year, transforming old garments and scraps into new raw material. The point is not the new investment. The point is that Prato has been recycling textiles since the 1800s. The traceability the EU is now mandating with the DPP is a system that exists in one specific district, by hand and by habit, for a century and a half. The next video in this series looks at what Prato actually does and why the EU regulation lands on infrastructure that was already there. On my right, when it goes up, and on my left, if you missed it, the Lycra Chapter 11 video I mentioned earlier. Stay curious. Talk soon.